Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a close look at Tower of Fantasy. This is an upcoming shared open world RPG that features action combat centered around juggling 3 weapons at a time. You attack, dodge, build up a meter, and then swap for these huge bursts of damage, rinse and repeat. And all of this combat is set within a large open shared world where you'll be running into other players constantly doing various activities, questing, clearing enemy camps, gathering resources for different materials for upgrading and cooking, and fighting world bosses even, and just about everything that you might expect from open world games. It's got a bit of all of it. Now, Tower of Fantasy is launching later this year. They are currently available for pre-registration. You can use that checking out the link below. Because this is a sponsored video, they reached out and wanted me to show the game off to you guys, and I'll be doing exactly that. I've played for a couple of days now. I want to take you through this early experience, show you what the combat is like, how the game plays, the sort of things you can do, just basically give you a good idea of what Tower of Fantasy is, what the game is like. And with that, let's jump right into it. I want to start off first by talking about the combat, because in my experience, this is what, at least personally, I've been doing most of the time. So it's an action combat based system, and what that means is we've got a series of different light and heavy attacks. You're not tab targeting, you're aiming towards things, trying to hit them with your abilities. So you've got a basic attack that you can spam, and that will combo into a different chain depending on the weapon that you're using. There's also different variations of your basic attack and spamming combos. There are dash attacks, jumping attacks, charging attacks. You can attack mid-air and actually stay up there juggling opponents, consuming stamina as you're levitating and attacking. And there are many different types of weapons: daggers and swords, spears and staves, bows, miniguns, so on and so on. Each one of these weapon types come with their own set of unique animations, their own attack patterns, as well as one unique ability. Every single weapon has those variety of basic attacks and those context-specific attacks with a unique skill that will have a cooldown. Now, the depth really comes from the fact that you will be focused on using multiple weapons at once. Specifically, you can equip up to 3 weapons at a time. The way combat works in practicality is you're swapping all the time, because as you attack with a weapon, you're building up this meter, and once that meter is full, swapping to one of your other 3 weapons will then trigger a special attack with that weapon. The special attack even has its own unique animation, and basically most of the time this just means it's an attack that's going to do a large amount of damage. On top of this, beyond building up that meter and then swapping, there's also this system of perfect dodges, where if you perfectly time a dodge and avoid an enemy attack, it forms this massive purple sphere, this dome, that slows down time within it, but instantly charges up your meter, allowing you to do that weapon swap for that special attack for huge amounts of damage. Now, further depth comes from the fact that there are elemental damage types in this game. Every single weapon will have its own unique affinity, and then that affinity can be used to counter enemies that have specific weaknesses, or maybe they're very strong against, they have defenses against a particular element type. So if you use a weapon with that sort of element, they will resist some of that damage, and then you will want to swap to a different type of weapon. So then really, again, combat will be boiling down to, okay, I'm using a special weapon, I'm doing these different attacks, I'm using its ability when it's on cooldown, building up the meter, swapping for that big boost, attacking with this weapon, using its cooldown, building up the meter, swapping for a big boost. In the mix of that, also doing some perfectly timed dodges for those extra weapon swaps, and it really actually ends up providing a pretty interesting flow and pacing to the game's combat system. Now, there is a further level of this that comes through the relics as well. So relics are these special items that come with unique abilities that they basically act as an additional skills. Now, relics can influence things and have effects on things like combat, your movement, but they can also function as a new way to interact with the world, and in a way sort of function like keys. So a few examples: one of the first relics that you unlock is the Jetpack. This is your basic movement relic. It lets you glide around. It also has an ability that just lets you propel straight up into the air. So you can kind of use this as a glider or as a way to get up higher to spots you couldn't otherwise get access to. There's also the Missile Barrage relic that launches missiles to deal big damage to enemies all around you. This is one of those relics that also function as a key, because it can break open any rocks that have cracks on them or walls that have cracks on them, providing you access to whatever is within it. The Strange Cube relic will do, after a brief charge, a big area of effect damage, knocking enemies back, and this can also move otherwise immovable objects. This will be used in a lot of puzzle solving in the game. There's the jet board. This is another movement one. It lets you glide over water. There's also the magnetic storm, which will summon up an electric tornado. And that's just a handful of the total amount of relics that you'll get and have access to in the game. And all of these systems, the light, the heavy attacks, the dash attacks, charge attacks, jump attacks, the special abilities, the weapon swapping, the perfect time dodging with the bubble, ends up actually making the combat feel more in depth than I expected it to, because you're moving through all of these different aspects of combat and constantly having to react in addition to whatever the heck the enemy themselves are doing, which I didn't even talk about. But yes, different enemies will have different attack patterns, the whole range of things, ranged enemies, flying enemies, mailing enemies, mortar enemies. It's an RPG, right? So the healthy mix of RPG enemy types that you would expect, and you have to pay attention to all of their different attack patterns, their charges, their area of effect things they might do, so on and so on. Now, this isn't just like a combat focused game though, it's an open world RPG, and there's a lot of the open world things that you would expect from an open world game. The game is made up of these several big connected zones that you can seamlessly travel to as well. Outside of fast traveling or any specific story or dungeon instances, there is no loading while you're playing the game and just exploring in general. You can go wherever you want and you won't be hitting any actual loading screens. There's a main story campaign though, and that'll take you from one zone to the next, following the big narrative. All along the way, there's plenty of other things to see and do as well. Lots of exploration because you have pretty good movement as a base. You've got a double jump. You can grab onto any terrain. It's got a stamina system for climbing, so you can't climb infinitely. You can mix and match this in with dash, and then also the fact that you've got like the Relic, the Jetpack, and other vehicles that really incentivize exploration. There's a lot of means of exploration. You've got a lot of mobility options. Out in the world, you will find camps. These are called Strongholds. There will be small ones that are indicated on your map with this tiny individual tent. These tend to have anywhere between like 5 and 7 enemies. There'll be a few basic enemies, 1 or 2 hard enemies. You clear those enemies, you open up the chest, and the camp is cleared. Now, because it's an open shared world game, enemies will keep on respawning. They're not going to be like cleared forever. All intents and purposes, as far as you're concerned, that spot would be cleared. You could come back later, kill the enemies, and eventually after a timer, you could actually also reopen those chests. But then there are much larger camps, and these also vary in size, but some of them are quite significant. Lots and lots of enemies, multiple chest and supply pods that you can collect. These are all containing valuable items. There's also ruins in this game, and this is essentially the system of dungeons. You will go up to these little triangular structures, interact with it, and then you can enter it. There'll be various difficulties. The increasing difficulties not only provide harder enemies, but better rewards. But yeah, basically these are dungeons. You'll go in, they'll be made up of several different rooms with groups of enemies and a boss at the very end. Now, the first few ruins that you go through at the very start of the game actually contain the first handful of relics that you unlock, and you'll get these pretty quickly. Every ruin also has a set number of chests that spawns in it, and these will adjust as well with the various difficulty tiers. And in my experience, these will also, the ruins in general, get more elaborate, they get larger, and they also come with more puzzles, different kinds of, not terribly difficult, but different puzzles to mix up the gameplay experience as you're going through the ruin. But again, it's all about going through rooms, clearing enemies, fighting a boss at the end, and collecting your rewards. Also, there are world bosses in the game. Every one of the zones have their own unique world boss. These are marked on the map. They come with very valuable drops, and these are just very, very difficult bosses. Now, when I was particularly playing, there weren't a lot of people on, just because of the time of day that I was playing and the server that I was playing on. But I have seen some of these populated servers with people engaging with groups of like 20 to 30 players going up against the world bosses. It was pretty crazy. When I tried myself, I figured, hey, maybe it scales with the number of players, and it could, but regardless, I was not dealing enough damage to actually have an opportunity to kill this thing. It was just not happening. It was worth a shot anyways. But yeah, there are world bosses in the game, so once this is out and live and tons of people are in the servers, engaging with these seems like it would be a pretty good time. There's also different fun little side activities. There are side quests. These will be blue and purple quests you can complete for extra resources, currency, and various other rewards. There are these things called training facilities. These are basically challenges in the form of mini games. So as example, you will have to maybe complete a race or make your way through a maze or solve a puzzle or go up against a special difficult enemy. Doing these will reward you with points that will be spent in one of the game's many shops, which I'll touch on in a minute. There are teleportation pads. These are called space rifts. These will be scattered all around the zones. It's just the game's version of fast travel. And as I mentioned with the movement section, there are also vehicles in the game. Early on, you unlock unlock a motorcycle. There are other types of vehicles that can be earned as you play, and this helps add to the traversal. And yeah, in general, zone exploration is a big thing. Clearing the camps, finding all of the supply pods. There are scenic points to unlock, the fast travel pads, clearing through the ruins. Every single zone has a tracker associated with it. As you progress, you unlock higher percentages. You will be getting rewards along the way. And there are also survey towers in every zone. So the zones start off completely enshrouded in like a fog of war. You'll only see things you're right next to. However, if you find these omnium towers, they will reveal all of the major points of interest. And this is just like the classic open world tower functionality. Also, lots and lots of collectibles. There are various resources, items for cooking, like giant dandelions, wheat fields, fish that you can get in the river, strawberries, an assortment of fruit and veggies and animals that are all used to cook food. There are these cooking stations all around the game. You make food that's basically used to replenish your health. You'll also find all sorts of upgrade materials in the world, gemstones, electronic and mechanical components, and all of this is used towards enhancing and upgrading your gear. And also some of these things require elemental, so they'll be like ore nodes that have a certain damage type that you have to apply. But there are these also, if you don't happen to have a weapon of that damage type, there are these walking elemental bombs all around the open world. You can pick them up and toss them, and then they will explode, dealing a certain amount of elemental damage to pop those resource nodes. There are also treasure chests all over the map. There are a variety of kinds of these, and they will have the resources and upgrade materials I just mentioned. There are regular rectangular chests that you can just walk up to and open, and then there are also these pyramid-shaped chests that require a specific passcode in order for you to open of different rarities. And then finally, and one of the big things that you will constantly be hunting for and in search of are the supply pods. These reward black and gold orbs, which is a primary currency used for the weapon shop. Speaking of which, let's talk about the weapon shop. This is the game's gacha mechanic. Unlocking and upgrading weapons is tied to the special orders weapon shop, and those black and gold orbs that you collect out in the open world, but also via questing and various account progression and unlocks. These are used to place weapon orders. So you consume one orb for a roll of the dice for getting a weapon. The shop will show the probability of you getting any of the various items or weapon types, with the higher rarity stuff being a lower percentage, of course. So you go out, you collect the orbs in all the means that they're collectible, you use them, and you see what you get. And this is where a lot of the power progression is tied up in this game, because a lot of it is around these higher rarity weapons. They also have a built-in pity system guaranteeing a weapon of the highest rarity after 80 orders, but also after every 10 orders, you're going to get an SR or an SSR, one of the two. And let me dive a little bit more into these weapons and the simulacra. So basic weapons are like the blue weapons is the most abundant. You're going to find a lot of these. You start out with these, but then as you play, you will slowly eventually start getting purple and orange weapons. Now, these two higher rarity versions of weapons are also tied to characters called simulacra. So basically, when unlocked, you can play as this weapon character, but it is purely cosmetic. You can choose to just use your main character that you created and use their weapons on that character. You don't have to play as the weapon characters themselves to use the weapon, I guess is the point. Now, the simulacrums do have unique traits as well, basically little passive abilities that you unlock eventually, but you can also equip these without actually having to play as the character. You can still play as the main character that you make, because yes, this game does have a character creation system. Speaking of which, lots of customization options. You make the anime character of your dream. They've got a bunch of presets that you can select from, both developer and community made options where they've like emulated some anime themed characters, or you can make one of your own with a lot of fine tuning adjustments, hair, face, eyes, nose, mouth, accessories, lots of tweaking that you can do here with sliders to adjust the size and position and put things where you please. They also have cosmetic clothing options. There's some base things to choose, but eventually you will unlock more as you continue to play. So yeah, you don't have to play as each specific weapon simulacra. You can just play as the character that you create at the very start of the game, which I think is a pretty good way to do it. And all of this stuff, the weapons, the gear, the simulacra, pretty much everything in this game has upgrades. You farm those items that we talked about to enhance the strength of your stuff, of your weapons, of your gear, of subsystems within them. Weapons themselves can be leveled up, and they have a star rating on top of that, where if you get duplicates of a weapon, you will then get an item to enhance that original weapon, increasing its star rating, making it stronger stronger. There are also matrices, which are chips that are put into your weapons to further boost their stats. The game also, on top of that, has actual gear as well. It's called equipment, and that's like the pants, the helms, the chest piece, the gloves, etc. And those come in different rarities and can also be upgraded with materials. And all of these systems for upgrading your gear, the currencies and the resources required for them, it all can just be farmed by playing the game and doing stuff in the open world. You can acquire those resources, those currencies. There is a free-to-play path here for those interested. And that actually pretty much is a base summary of this game, Tower of Fantasy. All the different things to do, the combat, the open world, the exploration. I've been playing for a couple of days, and I was honestly surprised. I enjoyed it quite a bit. In particular, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the action combat system. Whenever I hear weapon swapping in games, I immediately assume it's not going to be something that I enjoy, but I think they did it in a way where, with the options of the individual weapons, but then building up for that kind of burst weapon swap combo and then just constantly juggling between them, it actually made a nice kind of flow to combat that I found myself quite enjoying. And with that, we pretty much are going to be wrapping up this video. So thanks again to Tower of Fantasy for sponsoring. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative and useful. Tower of Fantasy is officially launching later this year. It'll be coming to PC and mobile in Q3 2022. Pre-registration has already begun. You can sign up by using the link in the description below. And that is going to do it for today. Thank you guys as always so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.